Hey everyone, welcome to the deep dive number 5 of the Open Web Foundry. We're closing in on the last few weeks before demo day, which we're going to have on December 2nd. So everybody save the date. We're starting to put together the roster of presenters for demo day, and it's going to be an invite-only event. So I'll be sending out those emails soon. And if you guys don't get one, then make sure to ping me at jesse@arweave.org, and I'll be sure to send one over. Today, we're going to be having our deep dive on pitching to pros. So this is Sebastian, the COO of Arweave, and has experience at Techstars, helping founders with pitching their decks to investors and other professionals. So he's going to walk you through that today. And then also on Friday, we're going to be having our community spotlight. We've got a pretty great roster coming up this Friday. We've got Agora, Block Search, Art by City, Open Science NFT, Rlog, and Spot. So make sure not to miss that. But without further ado, we have Sebastian, who's going to be presenting Pitching to Pros. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Jesse. That's exciting. Sounds like how many teams are there going to be then on Friday?
There's going to be 6 teams, including one alumni who I'm very excited about, the Agora.
That's a lot. Okay, so that promises to be pretty cool. And yes, we're also super excited about demo day, and that's a Thursday, right? Thursday, December 2nd.
Thursday, December 2nd. Yes.
Right, and we're gonna keep the sort of like this time of the day, right? Okay, great. Well, I'm super excited about that. Hopefully, you that are here with us today on GatherTown are equally excited. So let me start my presentation. Give me just a second. Please, Jesse, can you let me know once you can see this or if you can see
For sure,
this?
yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Looks good on my end.
Yeah, all right, cool. Is it also, let me try something out. Is this moving? Yeah.
I don't see any. Oh, yeah, it's moving now.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, yes, thank you everyone for joining. As Jesse just mentioned, demo day is closing in really quickly. It's always amazing to me to see how quickly these 6 weeks go by, and how much progress is usually accomplished in these 6 weeks. So that's really exciting. And if you've been checking the Arweave YouTube channel before, you might have encountered this presentation. We've been giving this every single Foundry basically, because it's very useful to those of you that are going to be presenting at demo day, or those of you that might just want to pitch, at this demo day or some other instance at some point in time. So yeah, as Jesse mentioned, for those of you that don't know me yet, my name is Sebastian. I'm part of the Arweave core team, and both at Arweave and at Techstars before that, I've been working very closely with teams to help them get to the stage where we are, when it's about presenting at demo day. And so I really enjoy doing that. I've done it a bunch of times. And I think that, if your ambition is really to present at this demo day, it's really time to start thinking about these things. So today we're going to cover, the type of audience that you're going to be talking to. We're going to be talking about the goals that you should be having for your pitch, and also the structure. Why the audience? Because identifying the audience is obviously super important for the type of message that you're going to be delivering. The goals, just because sometimes you set expectations too high, and that just creates a lot of pressure. And sometimes those goals are not even part of the format. And so it really is unattainable, and it sort of veers you off the sort of course that you should be having. And then the third one, the structure, because with the right structure, sometimes the structure matters a lot more than the individual messages that you're going to be having, or the arc, right? So having a nice arc of the story is super important, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that in a second. So again, the first step here to have an effective pitch is knowing who you're going to be pitching to. So, there's different types of audiences, and different types of audiences require different levels of detail. So for example, if you're pitching to people who are very familiar with the topic, say, if you're in the Arweave community alone, let's say you're presenting at at a community spotlight, you might want to skip some of the sort of introductory information and just like focus a lot more on the technical aspects of the project that you're working on. On the other side, if you're talking to a wider audience, you might want to like keep it down a little bit with the technical details and just explain perhaps the utility of the project that you're working on, or how to use it. And so in this case, the question is like, okay, who are you going to be talking to at demo day? And it's going to be a mixture, right? So you're going to be talking to the Arweave community. You're going to be talking to sort of like the broader Web3 community, enthusiasts, and also just like people that are participating, perhaps not super familiar with the Arweave ecosystem yet, and also some potential investors. And so this means that you should try to focus on keeping your explanations, have a nice mixture of like why your project is technically interesting and what the technical aspects enable, but you should also be focusing on like, how do I use it? How will it be used by others? How do you envision your users experiencing the product or the tool that you're building, right? And super important as well, as part of the demo day is, if you're thinking about raising some funds at some, down the line, what are the investors going to be caring about, right? So how do we get them interested? Okay, so let's start with the community. The Arweave community, by and large, is like super dedicated. We're exceptionally lucky to have such a dedicated and engaged community. And what Arweavers care most about is really just trying to understand, how it fits into the wider Arweave ecosystem, perhaps even in Web3, but also just like how to use them themselves and how they can collaborate. So make sure to include those elements there. Whereas investors will also care about those aspects, but they will also be, obviously, that's their sort of like job. And they're going to be thinking about how profitable your project will be down the line and how long it's going to take to get to that point. So in both cases, it's going to be super important to make sure that the audience is excited about your project. And this is going to be generally more important than just explaining in detail how it's going to be built and really going into the nuts and bolts of how it works. So, a demo day is not sort of like an engineering pitch. It's not a customer pitch. It's very different than that. So this brings us to the question. So what should the goal of your pitch be? Look, if it were a customer pitch, for example, your goal could be to get them to buy into your sort of like tool or service, or to even just like try it out and get some feedback. Okay, and then the hope that down the line eventually they might even end up paying for it. But in this case, the goal is a lot simpler. The goal is basically get a next meeting, right? So if you get to a meeting, be it with a community member or also with an investor, that is really what you wanna generate, right? So for example, the goal that I have in this presentation, it's not for you to just memorize everything. I want to talk to you after the presentation is over in the coffee and mingle area and just like start having real interactions there. That should also be the goal that you have at demo day. Just like trying to capture the sort of interest of the audience enough that they want to look for you on the coffee and mingle area and have some meaningful exchange or conversation. All right, so that sounds easy enough. Just get a meeting. But how do you get a meeting? Well, you do that by having something impressive to say, or something interesting, or something novel that they might have not come up with. But how do you do that? And so one of the, you can always like have some magical, super cool factoid that people are not aware of, that is going to draw a lot of attention. That's great. But by and large, something that you can always rely on is like having a nice structure for your pitch that will help you like put the right content in place to highlight it and just make it super easy for people to understand what your project is about. So this needs to be basically a good pitch needs to be gripping enough initially that it will keep their attention. It needs to be also interesting enough that it will continue getting their attention, and it needs to be succinct enough that it's going to be memorable, and that people are going to be able to talk to you afterwards about it. Okay, so in general, this is what we're envisioning for demo day. What the pitch should be like is introduction of around 1 minute, solution 4 minutes, and then a landing, which is like sort of like the closing statements of about 30 seconds. So in the introduction, what exactly should we be covering there? So what you always want to do in an introduction is like roughly introduce yourself, right? Like, who are you? You know, as the audience, you want to know who is this person that's talking to me. So a name is a great start, or identifier there. Then also like, why are you listening to this person? So perhaps like a little bit of background on them. So I started this presentation by saying sort of like my name and what my current role is in the Arweave ecosystem, and what I've done before, and how come I'm talking about pitching in general, right? And so I think that it's pretty useful to just like introduce yourself and have these basic things as a normal human interaction would have, and that's usually a good start. Then just like say in a very clear way what your project is about. Like this is usually a one-liner, like my project does blah 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 by doing this and that, right? So you don't go into a really long explanation at this point yet. And yeah, so that's usually pretty good already for the introduction. Then another thing that and this is just like a little bit about like why people should care about like what you're doing. Give a little bit like social proof. Perhaps you can embed a little bit your past experiences and other projects that you've been working on as to give this sort of like proof. Introduce yourself, your background, name your project, and what it's about in one sentence. Okay, once you've introduced the project, now talk about what the problem is that you're trying to solve, or perhaps it's not necessarily a problem. Perhaps it's an opportunity that your project is enabling. And so there's two common ways to go about this. The first is to exemplify with a story, like what the problem is. So, for example, Medium introduces a paywall. This affects thousands of content creators that lose on readers there. Second option is just to compare your project to a solution, or solution to something that is already existing in the Web 2.0 space. So, for example, building Dropbox for Arweave, right? This is pretty understandable and relatable to people. Once you've introduced the problem, present the solution. And there's a few options that you have here to present the solution. The most effective way by far is just to show the solution at work. And this is pretty cool. Obviously, it comes with a few downsides. You have two options here. Again, you can either demo it live or you can show a recording. Now, live demos are really cool. They show that you really believe in your project and that it's really working. But it comes in the downside that live demos are risky, right? And sometimes things don't work out, and then it's pretty embarrassing if you find yourself having technical issues in front of a lot of people, and that may cause you to choke up. The alternative there is to just be transparent and say, we've recorded this demo, like things are working, but we recorded a demo, and then you can just like play the demo. Don't record yourself like voice over. You can still talk, but the images that at least should be recorded. And this is okay. Not as thrilling, not as exciting as a live demo, but it still gets the job done. All right. Sometimes you're not really ready to show your project yet, like to demo it. But if you can't show your solution, you don't have an MVP ready or something, then the second option that you have is basically to explain it. And you don't need to just explain in abstract context or just using words. You can introduce visual elements here. And so, for example, you can use wireframes or mockups, or even product roadmaps are pretty useful in certain parts of your pitch. Again, it's super important that you focus on the key features of a solution. It's not that you need to show everything that is possible. Same with an MVP, right? The demo of an MVP, you're not going to be showing absolutely every option that you have that your project can actually accommodate. You just focus on the key things and just present those. All right, so key takeaways from this section is so the key aspects to remember here are like go straight to the point, focus on what matters the most in your project or in your tool. If you have many features, really try to narrow it down to the ones that people are going to be interacting with, that you foresee people interacting with the most, or in the beginning, right? The most powerful ones. Don't go into every detail. If you go into every little detail, the audience will lose interest. I promise you this. And this is not going to be, this is not the meeting for going into every single detail. The follow-up meeting after that, that's the right one to do this, where you can really showcase all the different functionalities that you have. What is super important, though, is to illustrate how users will be interacting with your solution and how you expect them to do so. So either this can be through, perhaps past experiences that they've had, that you've had, with some users already testing it out, or perhaps if you haven't gotten there yet, in a way that, you envisage them to use it, explain that. That's super interesting. If you have traction with users, of course, perhaps explain the usage patterns, and perhaps you can even insert learnings, unexpected learnings that you've encountered through the usage patterns that you've recorded. Okay, so at this point of your pitch, you probably will have already covered like 3 to 4 minutes and just explain this. Again, this is just the structure. The content will be a lot more dense. And it's time to wrap things up. You just don't end it by saying well, that was it. Thanks, folks. You actually have to have a nice rounded ending. So don't just say thank you, walk away. Try to rehearse the outro. And so a good outro is always thanks the audience and then actually tells them what you would like them to do next, right? So this is called a call to action. And there's different options that you can go about this. I'm Sebastian, this was pitching to pros. I'll be happy to answer your question. That is one. Another could be, I'm Sebastian, thank you very much for your attention. I would really like to tell you about what happens after you pitch to pros, how do you get to that meeting, how to schedule and behave in that meeting. Let's talk about that in the sort of coffee and mingle area. That's something that you can also build in, right? So it's important to have a call to action. Tell them this could be also something like, please follow us, or join our community here, start using something over there. There's a perk that you can redeem if you meet us afterwards. There's many ways that you can do this, but you have people's attention now, and it would be a shame if you waste that. So the way that I'm going to be doing this is, please come and meet me outside of the stage area, and let's just talk about your pitches. All right. That would be my call to action. Okay. I think my final thoughts would be, while the sort of the way that you're presenting is super important, the way that you will talk clearly and have the visual elements there and your demo working, that's super, super important. What really matters the most is that you have a clear, simple structure that people can follow and can remember. So, just focus on that and you will be fine. I'm Sebastian. I want to talk to you afterwards and outside of the stage area. Come meet me and let's talk about your pitches. Thanks.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thanks, everybody. So as Sebastian said, we're going to have a little coffee and mingle. So if you guys have any questions about the Foundry or Demo Day or any of that stuff, we're going to be out in the area where you guys are. So thank you guys very much.